You're listening to the Mission Makers Show, a podcast that inspires humans to get into the mindset of success. My name's Farah Nanji, and I'm the founder of a business in the motorsports industry that explores leadership lessons from things like Formula One. I'm also a DJ and music producer in the underground electronic scene, and a public speaker on key topics like resilience, building high-performance teams, overcoming learning difficulties, and stimulating creativity. And to tie it all together, I love writing thought-provoking content as a journalist for these industries which are so unique in themselves. On this show, I'm sitting down with some of the most inspiring and driven people I've met around the world to talk about their processes, their failures, the lessons they've learned, and how they are truly making an impact for this world. So we're kicking off Mission Makers with one of Formula One's biggest TV personalities, Rosanna Tennant. Being in the public eye is not an easy feat, and Rosanna has been presenting F1 week in and week out, travelling the world for the last few years, and has become a household name in motorsports broadcasting. We caught up with her just before the F1 season managed to kick off during the pandemic, and in this episode we get to hear what fuels her ambition in such a competitive sport, and also hear firsthand what it was like on the ground as she was in Australia where the F1 season was about to kick off in March, just as COVID-19 was taking over the world.
Hey Rosanna.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Nice to see you.
I know, it's so weird, isn't it? Not seeing people face to face, but I seem to be doing a lot of Zoom calls. So this is how I kind of interact with the world, as it were, at the moment. So this is my new normal.
But yeah, let's just start with the first question, which was, tell me how you discovered this passion for journalism, or generally what you're passionate about in life. Where did it all stem from?
I didn't really. I don't really know when I realised I wanted to be actually a newsreader. Was what I always wanted to be. I always used to say that to people. But I remember having a chat with my parents. I must have been about 14 or 15 maybe. It wasn't intense. They weren't trying to push me in a direction or find a career for me at that age. But I think we were just chatting about options for AS levels, A levels, because of course you sort of have to make those decisions around about that point. And I remember talking to them about what I enjoyed, and it was very much along the lines of writing. I loved my acting. And so we sort of floated a few ideas around. My parents often thought it would be good for me to maybe go into law, maybe a barrister. And that's something that I have to say, I still have moments where I'm like, oh, that'd be an exciting career to explore. But I think we sort of chatted through a few options, and journalism seemed to be one of the things that the subjects that I was interested in and the things I liked doing. It seemed to be something that those could lead to. And then from that moment on, it sort of became my go-to line and story. If someone, a parent's friend or a teacher or just my friends said, oh gosh, do you know what you want to do? Do you know what you want to be? I always just to reel off, I want to be a newsreader. People probably got really bored of it. But that was sort of what I wanted. But newsreader, I think, has changed anyway. I don't think that's necessarily a job that you set out to do now. I don't think you go and say, I'd like to be a newsreader. I think there are so many ways we get news now, and that has sort of, that traditional role has changed so much. So that was sort of the direction I started pointing myself in. So yeah, it's been quite a long time that I knew, and I think that's quite rare from speaking to friends and people, even in the industry now. They weren't totally sure that's what they wanted to do, but I did have this sort of direction of travel that I knew I wanted to go in.
Mm-hmm. And where did Formula One play into that? Were you more interested in news or sports, or was it always motorsport?
No, it wasn't motorsport, and actually that was just a really lucky coincidence. So I went to university and I did languages because I saw it as a sort of opening door subject choice. So I did French and Spanish. And then I did a master's at City University in broadcast journalism. So that focused across television and radio. And that was fabulous. That was an amazing year in London at City Uni. Very practical. We did a news show. We did a radio show every week. And after that, I knew I wanted to keep trying to get into the industry. And I was really lucky throughout my time at City that we would be put in touch with broadcasters. So I went and did some time at BBC South East, BBC Radio Kent. I worked at a local paper. It was very, it's all very the sort of things that people tell you, go and work at your local paper, which again is something that will change. And the generations coming through now, I try and give advice, and I sound very old fashioned when I say go and get a job at your local paper. That like doesn't exist, which is really sad, but that's just the way things have changed. And then, so after City, I then went and worked at Sky, and that was through a lecture that we'd had at City. Someone from Sky came and said, get in touch with me if you want to come and see what we do at Sky, do an internship or whatever it might be, just spend some time with us. And I was really reluctant. I really was bad at putting my kind of ambition in word form. I was always just like, I just want to go and I'll show them I can do it. Mm-hmm. And I managed to write an email to this guy, and lots of people were saying that they'd been asked to write a 500-word essay about why they wanted to be in news or in broadcasting. And I remember just being like, please don't ask me to write down 500 words. And thankfully, he just replied and said, yeah, do you want to come and work with us for a couple of weeks? So I went and I did that, and that was guest producing, which was fabulous, trying to find lots of people who could come in and talk to the interviewers about different subjects and different news stories. Then I moved across to the entertainment desk for a week, then back onto the Sky News sports desk. And it was just a really weird chance moment that one of the producers on the news desk said, oh, Rosanna, would you want to go with John Desborough? He's going to go to the Hilton on Park Lane for a McLaren event with Jenson Button. And I was like, oh, that sounds amazing. Yeah, thanks so much. But at the time, all I was worried about was my brother is super keen on Formula One and has subsequently worked in Formula One as well. I remember just thinking, oh no, that should be for my brother. He would really enjoy that. But anyway, of course I went, and I remember standing there watching the presenter change the wheel on the car, and I remember just thinking, oh, I changed the tire. And I remember thinking, one day I'd like to do that. And I think that was when slowly my newsreader ambition started to morph a little bit more into the sort of presenter role. And I was very lucky because after that I'd met someone at that filming day who worked in the sports sponsorship industry and sort of sports marketing, and he very kindly said that would I like to go and have some experience at their agency when I finished at Sky. And I was very stubborn. I was like, no, I'm going to be at Sky forever. About a week later I emailed the guy and said, actually, could I come and see you? So I went and worked there, and that just happened to be an agency that focused on motorsport, sailing and cycling. So I went to work there, and it was tricky at that point actually, because I realised I wasn't going to be, not that I thought I would be instantly, but it wasn't a presenting role, it was finding sponsorship for sports properties. So there was a little bit of like a letting go of my dream, so to speak. But I think you just kind of have to trust that certain opportunities are giving you practice for things that are coming for you later on down the line. And so yes, then it all kind of kicked through. I went off and did another little job at a shoe shop of all places. Again, just so weird, because you can start panicking, like, oh, I'm like deviating from the grand plan. But I think as long as you make the most of it, and I hope I did, I set up a sort of interview series where I interviewed some of the top wearers for that shoe brand. I went and asked them questions. We did a little film, gave them a pair of shoes. So that was a great experience. And then after that, about a year after I'd had that Sky experience, the old agency called me and said, would I like to go and present a motorsport channel? And again, I was really lucky because it was at a time that the sort of digital media and YouTube was really kicking on. It was at the end of 2012. And that afforded me an opportunity, because I'm not sure, I think it would maybe have been a longer slog, one that I would be really, I would have been so happy to do. But I think these opportunities on YouTube really, really helped me and got me on camera probably much sooner than I ever would have if I'd stayed sort of doing the slow traditional route.
Very interesting. It sounds like a lot of doors, but they've all eventually led you to this to this path. Do you feel like your intuition has guided you throughout that moment, particularly when, like you said, you worked in the shoe shop and it kind of deviated a little bit away from the grand plan? Do you find that the intuition kind of helped you at that moment?
I think there's obviously the element that you've got to earn money and you need to have a job, or I'm one of those people that wants to have a job. I think there were moments when I was a bit like, oh, this can't be right, because this isn't going to get me to where I want to go. And I actually remember probably a couple of years ago when I just secured some sort of different opportunity, little job somewhere. And I remember speaking to my dad on the phone, and he was so sweet. He said, oh, look, your shoe shop days are behind you. And I did say to him, but you have to remember, that's all led me to this point. If I hadn't done the shoe shop venture and done the marketing selling men's shoes, I wouldn't have ever got here, because I wouldn't have done all those little routes to get to where I've ended up. And it's that classic phrase from Steve Jobs, saying that the dots all join up looking backwards. And I think it's just having the trust that once you get to where you want to be, all those little routes have made it interesting and have helped you get there. It's like a journey, you don't want to just go in a straight line. You want to kind of wiggle a little bit to see some fun things on the way. And I had some great times working at the shoe shop. So it was all meant to be quite fatalistic like that.
Yeah, and just a last question about the journey within that. Like, how was your childhood, and has that played into anything about what you do now?
I think my parents are hugely supportive, and like I said, we sat down and had a conversation about what I was interested in. It wasn't you must be a lawyer, banker, doctor, whatever it might be. The sort of big careers that people perhaps sometimes are pushed into by their parents. My parents have always been very, very positive about what I can achieve, not in a pushy parent way at all. It's just sort of go for it, darling. So I think I've always felt that if I give my absolute best, then something could be possible. I think I always hope that I'm very much not entitled, but enabled by them to go off and do some wonderful things. So yeah, I've had the happiest of childhoods, so I can't complain there at all. And I've had amazing opportunities, and I just hope that I've made the most of each and every one of them with the support of my parents.
So that being said, what sort of footprint do you want to leave on Earth?
Well, probably a really big footprint, because I've got such big feet. On the footprint side of things, I think something that really matters to me is that people think I am good at what I do. I don't ever want to be one of those people that touches something and then heads off and they go, oh, that wasn't done that well. I just really want people to think, do you know what? We need a job doing. Who's the best person for that? Oh, okay, it's Rosanna. Let's get her in. And I just always want to be remembered for having given my all, done my best, and hopefully have been a nice person to work with through all those sort of adventures and opportunities.
Oh, that's really sweet. What do you think then? Like, have there been any hurdles that have gotten in your way, particularly with Formula One now?
Yeah, there have been hurdles. The problem is, I sort of think back to them, and at the time they feel so stressful, insurmountable, but they're sort of all probably just very day-to-day things, might be like logistics or just going that extra mile to try and achieve something. And in terms of me personally, I was always a little bit worried about what people thought of maybe how I sound. And that was always a worry for me, I have to be honest. But I've been very lucky that I haven't had very much or hardly any negative feedback about that. I think that's something that's always been in the back of my mind. Also about how I look, and I don't really mean that like kind of what I wear or like that sort of thing, but actually my size. I am 6'2", not what people would categorize as like a normal size for a woman. And obviously I interview much smaller athletes just because of the industry I work in. Motorsport means that the guys and girls that compete have to be pretty slender, pretty obviously very fit and pretty slight, but very it's easier to be smaller in a car. You don't want to be my height in a car, and that's why we don't see very, very tall drivers. And so it's difficult for me when I'm interviewing them. when we were at university learning about broadcast journalism, you're always worrying about the eye level. You know, you don't want to have your interviewee looking up the whole time. And that's something that's actually really difficult for me to avoid. So if you're ever watching an interview that I do, you'll see I sort of drop a hip or I slightly kind of crouch. There have even been times where drivers, some of the rally drivers used to stand on, one guy stood on a concrete block, one mechanic I was interviewing stood on an engine, like a battery. So it's, that's always been in the back of my mind. And then a couple of years ago when I started working sort of more directly for Formula One, and that had always been jokey, all those sort of moments where someone was standing on something or I was crouching, it was always very, it was nice jokes. No one was being like, oh, you're too tall, or this looks ridiculous. And then I had a moment where one of the people who was sort of directing me thought that I would look silly on screen, and said exactly those words. I would look silly on screen next to some of the drivers. And I was, I think I was 29 at the time. So, you know, long gone were the days of being bullied at school for my height. Yes, I get lots of people talking to me in the street, perhaps about my height, or commenting on, you know, my gosh, how tall are you? And that's always been there, but nothing horrible for a long time. And so to have someone that essentially controlled whether I would or I wouldn't make it, telling me that I would look silly on camera, I was just in pieces. And I remember calling my mum and saying, I just don't know what to do, because it's something I can't change. You know, these are physical attributes. There's so many people that live with things we can't change. That's something that, how am I going to get, I'll never make it. This is a nightmare. And I remember the next day I then went on camera with someone who he'd actually quoted as someone that I would look silly next to on camera. So all the while we're live and I'm standing next to the person that I've been told I would look silly next to, thinking, I look silly now, I look silly, which isn't the best way to go into being live on camera. So there are those sort of setbacks, but equally, and it sounds so cliche to say, it's actually made me want to prove them wrong, that I can do it just because I'm 6'2". That makes absolutely no difference. And it would make no difference if I was 5'2" or 4'2" or 1'2". It doesn't matter. If you're good at your job, size, color, religion, doesn't matter. As long as you've shown up, done the hard work and the preparation, nothing should stand in the way of you being able to achieve what you've set out to, and for you to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. It is all about mindset, and that's, like you said, you can't change those physical attributes. And I hope that guy is, has swallowed his words now. It's been incredible. And so, you surround, obviously, Formula One. It's such a fascinating sport, and so many sort of variables around that, in terms of traveling all the time, the politics. I do want to ask you about sort of females in the motorsport side as well. But before we get into that, do you have any success habits that you might like to share with us that you've found have really helped you while you're on this crazy traveling circuit?
I am quite strict on myself. I'm probably quite strict on others as well, which is sort of a good and a bad thing, I think. I like high standards, and I believe we're only here for a short time. So as I said before, show up, give your best, do your absolute best. And no one can ever judge you for that. But I do want to do my best at all times. So I live quite a strict life. And I think also the Formula One industry, as you say, it's so fast paced. We're never in the same space for very long. And so simple things like, I write a to-do list most days, which I'm sure a lot of people do, but it's really important. And even during lockdown, sometimes I write, wake up, success, I've made it through the night. And, I always make my bed every morning. That's like the first win of the day. And also it just feels like then you're ready to kind of go. So as long as your bedroom is tidy, and same with my desk, I like to have that all neat and tidy when I go to bed at night, so that in the morning I'm ready to sort of drive my desk, as it were. When it comes to traveling, I'm terrible to arrive at a hotel with, because everyone goes, we check in and then they're like, cool, right, meet down in the bar in 5 minutes. I'm like, oh, can I have a little bit longer? And it's not because I want to sort of do my hair or put my makeup on or anything. It's because I want to unpack completely. Because when you're in some hotel or a place for 4.5 days, and you're living quite a full-on life in terms of being at the track. So we'll leave for the track at sometimes sort of 6 o'clock in the morning, and we won't get back until about 8 or 9 at night. I can't operate if my room looks like the suitcase has exploded all over it. So I like to hang everything up. I like to unpack all of my wash bag around the bathroom, not just everywhere, but like, neatly ordered. I keep a diary every day. So I have my diary and a book by my bed. And as long as it's all kind of set like that, it also means I can just like switch in to being at home, as it were, in a hotel, which when you're away for as many days as we are in Formula One, that's really important to feel at home straight away. So that's really key to me, sort of succeeding and being good. And then I think success habits as well. I do realise, and I think I've realised throughout lockdown, that I definitely need exercise, some form of fitness every day. And sometimes when I'm tired, I can put off exercising in the morning because I think, oh no, I must sleep in more, and actually I'm much better. But I feel much better to get up, do my exercise, and then do my day. I think if I put it off, inevitably it sort of falls off the edge, and it's something that gets put aside and not done. So it's sort of realised that actually I need to be working out in the morning, which again is really difficult when we're on the road, because when we're on the road, we're leaving so early, it would mean my alarm will go at like 3 a.m. So yes, it's actually kind of scaring me a little bit, the thought of going back out there, as it were, on the road and trying to keep my routine going. So I think routine is really important. I'm sure a lot of people find that helps them kind of structure their day. We're no longer at school where you're told you've got 3 classes before break and 2 classes before lunch, and then you'll go and practice some sport potentially, or do something in the afternoon. We're not kind of given that schedule and that timetable anymore. So it's quite important that I still think it's important that it's there. So I need to slightly instill it in my life.
No, it's very true. Routine is so key to achieving and laying the foundations for success to then like manifest throughout your day. And I resonate with a lot of what you said, particularly like I travel a lot, and I do a lot of the same in terms of like just making sure it's all just ready to go, and you probably spend more time unpacking, and but then it all pays off in the end. And also I read that you walked something crazy like 600 kilometers, has it been, in lockdown?
Yeah, I do love my walking. I think also just on the unpacking side of things, I think efficiency is so important, because it's lovely. We have lots of lovely hours in a day, but blinking suddenly it's Wednesday, and then suddenly it's the weekend, and a whole week's gone by. So I think being efficient, not actually simple things like always putting your keys down in the same place, or put your headphones somewhere so that automatically, right there, that's where I left my keys. So you don't spend half an hour running around your flat or your house trying to find your keys. So it's just simple things like that it sounds really OCD, but it's actually just useful because it saves you time, which means you can do some other activity instead, which could be a fun one.
Definitely, especially Formula 1's all about shaving those nanoseconds off.
That's me. A mini Formula 1 team operating alone.
Yeah, it would be hard not to get in that like almost obsessive mindset around like sort of free up, and what then can I replace that with? But also just what you said about traveling and then making time for fitness. That is quite a difficult one, and I would have thought though that because the nature of your job, like obviously when you go to a track, there's so much walking. So do you find that like you are like getting those steps in anyway, like throughout your time there?
I tend to wear a Fitbit. I've actually taken it off for this week because I was becoming not obsessed with it, but you can get so into how many hours have I slept, how many calories have I burned, how many paces and things. But yes, when I wear a Fitbit at the track, I sometimes worry that it's going to just kind of combust on my wrist. I walk and sometimes run when there's back-to-back interviews in different places and locations around the track, a fair way every weekend, which is lovely. And I have to say, I think being outside as part of my job is just so wonderful, and I'm so lucky. And I definitely take it for granted because I think I'm in that work mindset. So I'm like, I'm at work, but I slightly forget that, oh my gosh, I'm in a wonderful country potentially, walking around nice areas and up and down the pit lane or up and down the paddock, and you don't realize you're getting your paces in. But I do love walking. I mean, you mentioned my lockdown walking has taken on a new meaning. It has really it's been something that I've really enjoyed. So I've actually come down to stay with my parents. I came down on the day that we went into lockdown.
Yeah.
And it was really important for me to have little things that I did during the day on my own. Obviously I had my work, but I I would go for maybe a run or a walk, and we were very lucky we're in the beautiful countryside, so it's been time to think, to get my head straight before a day of work, or to sort of undo all of the work from the day that we've just had, go through it and slightly kind of process it. I've listened to wonderful podcasts. I have listened to new music, old music. I've chatted with friends while I'm walking along, to family. My brother's not here, so I've rung him and chatted to him. And it has just been a wonderful time. And also we have been so lucky with the weather. It's like almost just so unlike England to be so beautiful and sunny. And so to make the most of being outside, and also during spring, which is, I don't really get to see spring in the UK anymore because I'm away during sort of April, May time. And so I sort of come back into the UK and like the leaves have changed a little bit and maybe they're about to come out. And then I come back and they've already come out, and you do miss that when you're away. I know that sounds awful because I'm very lucky to travel, but yeah, the simple things like spring arriving in England, that's something I've really missed over the last few years. So actually to have that has been a real treat. So yeah, being able to get outside and walk, and I don't take that for granted at all. So I've been making the most of it.
Same, yeah. I think it's also like the ability to go for a walk with your family and stuff. That's like such a precious time that, particularly when you're doing what you do, which is even more fast paced, is like, it's quite rare. Do you what type of music do you listen to out of interest?
All sorts. I have Spotify, which I don't know if it's a good or a bad thing. Some people prefer other music providers, but I quite like the sort of release radar, so I often kind of fire that up and listen to a few of those, and then choose which ones I like. What do I like at the moment? I can tell you. Shall I have a little look? Picture This, I think I've been listening to a little bit on. What's it called? Picture This. I like Bastille. And then, I really like Circles by Post Malone at the moment. I seem to be listening to that over and over again. And it's funny, actually, a lot of music on my phone, when I listen to it, I'd be like, oh my gosh, that really takes me back to such and such a race or such and such a weekend away at a track. And it's funny how I can be like, oh God, I remember that so well. That was Hungary last year. Or, oh my gosh, I remember when it was raining in Germany, I listened to that. So it's interesting how certain tracks really remind me of certain places that I've been to, which I'm sure as a DJ you have as well. Yeah. It's kind of, it's so important. It's like my soundtrack to my travel and my work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think just with Spotify, I think it's great in the sense of like new discovery, and like the algorithm really helps. That I personally use it a lot for that. But the only annoying thing about Spotify, just from an artist's perspective, is just how little gets back to the artist, and that's quite sad. Yeah, such a big subscription model. But yeah, absolutely. These tracks, they take you back to a moment in time, or they just become like a soundtrack of your life, and it's really important. Another quick question, when you talked about walking in the Fitbit, is there an average you could say on like how many steps you take in a track?
Oh, at a track, I probably take probably on a Sunday, Saturday and Sunday. Well, no, actually, probably all days. Definitely over the 10,000 mark with like no trouble there. I think the most I've ever done was in Monaco back in 2016, something like that. I think I was over into like 22,000 steps, 23,000 steps one day. It's a good old place to get your paces in.
Cool. Okay, nice one. So actually another question I want to ask you talked about interviews and getting into the mindset. So is that a natural process for you? I mean, how does it work? Do you kind of know what you're going to ask somebody, or is it you just kind of capture the moment and the story, and you bump into a driver and you just ask them a question?
I think it helps to be across what's obviously going on in whatever field you work in, whichever industry. I always say that it's important to obviously have a bit of knowledge about what you're going to be talking about, and also to have prepared. So yes, I might be like grabbing, in the nicest sense of the word, a driver as I see them in the paddock. But even though it's just a spontaneous interview, because we're all across what's going on in the media as far as Formula One goes, as far as motorsport and the automotive world goes, it's quite easy then to think, oh, it's cool, I'll talk to him about that because that team was having that problem yesterday, or it's really hot today, so maybe that would be a good question to ask them about how the car will handle and the tires, or just if you're kind of across what's going on, especially over the course of a race weekend, it's quite easy then for spontaneous interviews to sort of just pull out the themes of the weekend and potentially ask that particular driver those questions. When it comes to a more thought out and a sort of what we'd like to call a sort of sit down interview with the drivers or team personnel, I'll always do a lot of investigations in terms of what they've been saying recently, maybe check on their social media, check any news articles that have come out about them. And then it's really tricky because you don't want to just completely copy what's gone before. You don't want to just go and do a complete copy of an interview that you've read, because that doesn't offer anything to fans. So it's then trying to kind of take it on a step. And that can be quite tough because you're like, oh gosh, it just feels like I'm reinventing the wheel. What am I going to do? How can I make my interview better and different? So that's quite a bit of pressure. And equally, you don't want to sort of rehearse it so much in your mind that you think, right, I'll ask him that question, then he'll definitely answer that. So then that will take us on to this, because, it's a human being that you're interviewing. So they're not necessarily going to give you the exact answer that you thought would be your format of your interview. And so for that's then back to the whole preparation thing, because I can, for example, Daniel Ricardo, you can't ever go into an interview with him and think, cool, I'll ask him question 1 and then he'll give me the perfect answer and I'll go straight on to question 2 because that's a perfect segue, brilliant. He'll go sort of like ask him question 1 and then he'll jump to a subject that you may have had up your sleeve for like question 10 or something. So that's when preparation and knowledge is quite important, because you can then like jump to that and dart back to that and know exactly kind of what he's referring to, and then you sort of pull on bits of your interview plan, as it were, or thoughts about what topics you'd like to talk to him about as you go along. But you don't want to stay too sort of strict and rigid to your plan, otherwise you can lose the sort of the dynamic element to the interview. And I always say to people, listen, because there's nothing worse than sticking to your 10 questions and missing something really important that they say back to you on the answer for question 1. So yeah, it's really important to just kind of go with where they're sort of taking it, obviously controlling your interview, but knowing that you've listened to them, and hopefully then that will give it a nice flow. Sounds very scientific when I put it like that. Not really that well planned, but
But then here's one for you, like, what about people like Kimi, who are just notorious for not wanting to engage so much with the media? How do you overcome that? And have you had to interview him? Like, how's it kind of been?
Yeah, I have interviewed Kimi. He's wonderful. Goodness me, he's such a fan favorite, which I find amazing. I'm not shocked by it, because I think people love that sort of character, the ones that, give very little, but when they do, it's so much more precious than anyone else. So yeah, it's always been fun interviewing him. And it's a privilege to interview all the drivers, I have to say. But he makes you work for it. And there are other drivers without the sort of Kimi characteristics that make you work for it too. But I kind of go maybe more for like a little shock approach with him, because if you just go straight to the point with him, he'd just be very straightforward. So yeah, sometimes I probably seem like an idiot to him coming up with random questions, but sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And that's the thing, I guess, when they don't kind of play along, you can't get disheartened or sad about it or think you've done a really bad job. As long as you've prepared and asked them a sensible question, then whatever they come back with usually makes a headline with Kimi. So you just have to be a bit careful about that.
Absolutely. So what's been your experience of females in the business world of Formula One, and also I know we both met because of Dare to Be Different, which for anybody who's not familiar with that, it's a really interesting initiative set up by Susie Wolf to kind of inspire more girls to get into motorsport. So Rosanna and I have both been volunteering in different aspects of the organisation and helping sort of expose some of these hidden career paths, let's say, that haven't traditionally been so so much spotlight hasn't been put on. So yeah, what is your sort of view on the whole thing?
Well, it's definitely changed. I first set foot in the F1 paddock in 2013, and it's definitely changed since then. There are a lot of women in the sport. People might say that they're very traditional women roles. A lot of them work in more of the PR side of things, press and communications, hospitality side of things. There are strategists, there are mechanics, there are engineers, and that's something I've definitely seen change over the years. So you see more women on the pit wall now making decisions out there. And I think obviously that is absolutely as it should be, the best people for the job. And that, as I said before, whether that's man, woman, it doesn't matter who, anyone who's going to show up and give their best is welcome. The Dare to Be Different initiative, I'm very honoured to be an ambassador for that. I love the phrase Dare to Be Different because I think that doesn't just affect girls and women, it can affect anybody. And that's what's so important about an initiative like that. Just as you say, kind of opening up the possibilities in the motorsport industry and the automotive industry. I think a lot of people just think, oh, you've got to be a driver, or you've got to be a mechanic, or you've got to be an engineer. And there are so many other roles within a team and within the industry. So it's really important that those are kind of brought to the forefront so people know potentially they could get involved. It's not a closed door. And as I say, it doesn't matter if you're a woman, that's great. And if you're not, there's still opportunity for you as well. So yeah, I love being involved in Dare to Be Different. And I think we're doing a better job. I think it's so difficult, isn't it? You're chasing equality the whole time, but I feel in a way what we're actually just chasing is the best, and the best, it doesn't really matter what quota that is, as long as you've got the best people for the job, and as long as many people were able to apply for that job from different corners of the earth, then that is great. But as long as the decision at the end is that the best person got the job after the process, then that for me is all that matters.
But do you feel like, and absolutely, people who work in F1 have not got there by not being the best at what they do. But what about on the driver's side? Because men will have progressed a lot farther because it's just historically been more of an open sort of playing field for them. So by the time the females kind of get up to that speed, the men could have just accelerated even further. So there's like a disparity gap between how much the best can get to it. So, do you see, you're obviously on the inside, and we know you have people like Tatiana and like others that are getting those developmental roles. Do you really think that in the next 5 years, 10 years, someone's going to take the plunge and just put them in a good team, and that they'll be equal to their counterpart?
I think that, well, on a behavioural side, they will be equal. They will always be considered equal to their male counterpart in the garage. And the problem we have is it's a physicality issue. There are certain ways that women and men are made differently from a physical point of view. And having spoken to Tatiana, she says she has to work harder to put on muscle mass because she is a woman. And genetically, that is something, as I can't change being 6'2", she can't change what muscle fibers she was given as a woman. So there's that element. So there's a physical side that we've got to work our way around as women and as trainers to try and get the best out of their athletes. That is something that is going to always be there. Obviously, the ways that we train now are better. So potentially there is a way for women to get stronger and stronger and stronger. And of course, there are many women who have far outperformed men in various sports and athleticism. As far as taking the plunge, I think teams are getting there. Obviously, we're seeing like Tatiana Calderon with her development role. I think we've seen Susie Wolff in the past, obviously, who set up Dare to Be Different. Jamie Chadwick is doing a fabulous job and obviously won the W Series. Will we see her? She's now at Williams in a junior driver role. Will we see her potentially take part in some practice sessions in the coming years? I really hope so. My biggest fear, and this is in any role, not just as a driver, is those women don't want to be put into a car just because we say that there should be 4 women drivers on the grid or 14 women drivers on the grid. They don't want to be there for that. They want to be there because they've beaten the other people that were contesting that seat. They want to be there for that reason. And as long as that's what happens, then that is fine. As the biggest problem is making sure that everyone who wants to be considered for that seat is considered. And that's the it's not really the final decision that's the important one. It's more the fact that enough people are able to be taken into consideration to make that decision. I think that's where we've got to really invest the time and the money and the resource to make sure that people have access to being considered.
No, absolutely. That kind of leads me on quite nicely to the next question, because obviously, even though it's been lockdown, there's been quite a few things happening in the Formula One world, from, you know, Carlos going to Ferrari to this whole stuff about Williams and some of the business potentially being put up for sale. Lewis being quite outspoken around this, how people haven't sort of been vocal about the things happening in America right now with the Black Lives Matter. So basically what I wanted to ask you is, you know, do you, if this stuff changes at Williams, which has been quite a team that's been very for women, and Claire's been, you know, quite, I think she's been quite motivated, or, you know, hungry to employ women, and she obviously got Susie into that role, and Jamie, as you say. So do you think some of that might change if, like, the Williams ownership changes? And just general perspectives on your thoughts about, you know, Carlos going to Ferrari and Lewis talking about people not being so vocal around the political side of things in the world.
Yeah, for a lockdown and a shutdown, I think there's been plenty to talk about. I don't think we've been hungry for content, and we've been very lucky. I think the esports side of things have given loads of news stories with Charles Leclerc's girlfriend, we've had Nico Rosberg's wife in the background, lots of little windows into the worlds of these drivers in their private lives, which I think is amazing when you think that Charles Leclerc is Ferrari's #1 driver, and we're seeing a side to him that we would never have seen back in the day. And of course, that's technology allowing that to happen, but how wonderful for fans to know, you know, more about their favourite driver and their future sort of hero, as I feel he will become, of the sport. So I think it's been an interesting few weeks. Obviously, the atrocities that are happening in America are horrific, and it's really interesting to see how the industry has responded. I think obviously Lewis calling out the fact that there had been quite a lot of silence was a huge moment for the sport. And I think a lot of the drivers have responded, and I think a lot of their messages after it were ones of showing that they weren't sure how to use their voice. And I think a lot of people have slammed them for that sometimes, and other people have really appreciated that honesty. And I think you know, it is really difficult in this industry with social media. You can put words to your post and they can be meant in such a positive way, and then they can be used against you, or they can be seen in a negative tone that you never ever intended them to have. So I think it's been great that Lewis has raised it. It's a shame that it obviously is something that still needs to be raised, and obviously in the bigger picture of what's going on in America outside the F1 world, that's just, it's unforgivable that is still going on in 2020. It should never have gone on ever, but the fact that it's still going on now, and there's been so many conversations about it, and I just feel that I mean, yeah, it's just abhorrent. In terms of back into the little small microcosm of Formula One, Charles being partnered with Carlos Sainz is going to be wonderful. I think what an opportunity for Carlos Sainz. He has been to very many teams on this grid now. He has sampled quite a few. So it'll be really interesting to see how he gets on. I think it'll also be interesting just to see how this year plays out, because McLaren have been on the up. We've seen great work from Andreas Seidel working with Zach Brown and the team there to really turn the team around, and they're definitely on the ascendance with Lando and Carlos, and that's been a wonderful dynamic to watch with those two guys. Daniel Ricciardo going into McLaren, I think is a good move from him. I'm a little bit disappointed that the Renault relationship didn't come to any sort of fruition, and I feel like that was a bit of a damp squib. I mean, everyone feels that, I think. And yeah, we'll just wait and see how it all plays out. But it's a weird one because we're getting the announcements now. I sort of feel like when we go racing in Austria at the beginning of July, I'm going to expect to see Daniel in McLaren clothes and Carlos in Ferrari clothes, because I sort of feel like these are the announcements that we would get like towards the end of a season or in a winter break. So I'm kind of yeah, I've got to remember that no, we've still got to go through the season as was with, you know, Sebastian and Charles at Ferrari, and that's going to be exciting, of course, and working out where Sebastian Vettel will head. You know, that's still a piece in the puzzle to be found. So yeah, it's been an amazing few months. I mean, terrible that we're in this situation from a world pandemic side of things, but I think there have been some positives. There have been some little moments of happiness and lots of laughs that Formula One has created, the drivers have created, and hopefully when we all go racing again, I think these drivers are going to appreciate what they do a little bit more. I think perhaps we wring them out a little with all of our interviews at track and during preseason testing, and asking them constantly, how do they feel? How does the car feel? And it's been interesting interviewing them over this time. They all seem fresher. They feel like, it feels like their brains have more kind of capacity to, and they're all highly intelligent, but it feels like they're fresher. There's like a renewed vigor, and their answers are so much more chatty and relaxed, and it's been really nice talking to them, albeit via Zoom. And so I hope from a few chats with them, saying that, you know, this time has really made them think that firstly they may have a bit more time to add on to their career now. This break may have afforded them more of a career afterwards, and also I think that they'll go into it really enjoying it and not, you know, begrudging some of the travel or the interviews or the things that go with being a Formula One driver nowadays. So hopefully we'll see a happier paddock, I hope. Definitely a more, a cleaner paddock potentially as well.
Really interesting. And can you share any predictions on this missing piece of the puzzle around Vettel? Do you think he's going to retire, or do you think he's going to go to another team?
I don't know. There are so many mutterings, and probably by the time this podcast goes out, he'll probably have said where he's going. I don't know. I sort of feel like, is it a time to bow out? There are a few options, aren't there? But it would be too sad to sort of have a bit of a, well, he's very successful at Ferrari. Of course, the championships don't show that, but he had some good wins with them. But it would be a bit of a shame to sort of, having had the success at Red Bull, sort of go to Ferrari, not really do what you set out to achieve, and then go somewhere else that didn't deliver a championship for 1 or 2 years, and then really he's at the end of his career. Is it better to say ciao to the red team and bow out and maybe go into a management role or something along those lines? I don't know. I know he's a popular driver, a very, very clever driver, very analytical driver. So I'm intrigued, but I don't know. I feel like the Mercedes team have a good thing going on with Lewis and Valtteri, so to bring him in there would be upsetting the balance that they've created over the last few years, but equally would make sense from a commercial point of view for a German to be driving for a German team. Then there's the Aston Martin potential. Could that be a good place for him to go and to sort of build the new team, as it will be, a little bit around him? So many options. He's a lucky guy. And equally, I don't think retiring with 4 championships to your name is a bad place to end either.
Yeah, no, definitely a lot of options. And I guess it has to be done in a way that really fulfills him as well, you know. So just a quick one on your thoughts about the whole Williams thing. What do you think about all of that?
Yeah, it's sad, isn't it, when you see a team struggling? And I think when people watch the Netflix episode, mainly focusing around Williams, it was heartbreaking when you see some of the teams that have a much more luxurious feel to them, and you see that, you know, it's really kind of building pieces in the 11th hour and getting them to the track, and it was heartbreaking to watch. And I think Claire Williams was very honest. She's always been very honest in her interviews about the situation with the team and how much they're trying, but it seems a little like pushing water up a hill for them at the moment. And I think this is probably a sensible route to go down. I don't think they would have gone down it if they didn't see it as the best option. It'll be interesting to see who comes in and buys the team or a share of the team. And as you say, it may impact the driver choices. It may, unfortunately, disadvantage some of the junior drivers who had been signed up. But, you know, these things hopefully will resolve themselves, and it'll be in Williams's advantage to get them sorted sooner rather than later. And hopefully they'll come out fighting, and hopefully fighting for, you know, start with maybe in the midfield. That would be great, wouldn't it, to see them, you know, battling it out with people rather than languishing at the back. So I just hope it's all for the best, and that we'll keep 10 teams on the grid, and 10 strong teams at that.
Well, you just got to wonder, if the virus thing hadn't happened, then it was really exciting thinking about the budget changes that were happening, and that maybe that might have helped them to just get a bit more equal. But yeah, I do hope that women will still stay at the heart of their mission as well. You talked about the Netflix thing, so what do you think about all of that? Did you like season 2? Did you find there to be a difference? Is it really accurate in what's going on? Yeah.
I watched season 2 too quickly. I think it was one of those things that I was like desperate to have watched it by the time I got to Melbourne. So I was kind of like, next episode. Yeah. And I wanted to watch it again and go through it slowly and kind of process it. I think it's a true can't even say the word. It's a true representation of what goes on. I think the likes of Gunther Steiner have kind of really shown it for exactly what it is. I'm sure other team bosses are just like him, but don't necessarily show it on the Netflix documentary. As a whole, as the documentary as a whole, season 1 and season 2, I think it's been amazing opening the sport up to people who don't watch the races on a Sunday afternoon. I've had lots of lovely friends messaging saying, I've really got into Drive to Survive, I'm really enjoying it. And people who I didn't think would enjoy it. And very naively, and it's probably why I wasn't asked to direct or produce the series, I wouldn't have sold, if someone says to me, why should I love Formula One? Really superficially of me, I'd probably say, it goes to some wonderful countries, really glamorous locations, the cars are really fast, really amazing hospitality. I'd try and sell it in a kind of hedonistic way. Whereas, of course, this series has really approached it from the business angle and the goings on behind closed doors at the headquarters of these factories and the teams, and shown how they operate as a proper business. And I think that's actually what's captivated people. And that's why people have found it interesting, because, it's not just about where Lewis Hamilton and Sebastian Vettel are heading this year. It's about the lower teams down the grid. How are they struggling? How are they surviving? Which driver will or won't make it? But he's had really good results, but he didn't get the seat. This is outrageous. Those are the sort of messages I'm getting from friends. Like, I can't believe he's been let down by the team. So I think people really latched on to the characters that were shown in Netflix series 1. And I think, the second series was just a great continuation of that. And I think it's great just to have a bit of a behind the scenes look at the sport. And if it can bring more fans to watch on a Sunday afternoon, then I'm all for it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Last couple of questions as a journalist. Any tips for communication in crisis from your side?
Communication crisis? Run for the hills.
I mean, more obviously we're in this crisis mode as a world, and from a journalist point of view, what do you think companies or people, when they kind of trying to still get on with business and the world, need to be mindful of now that we're just sort of in this crazy, undefined period of time?
I think it's been the undefined element has been something that I've definitely struggled with on a personal, day-to-day level. I live and die by my little diary. I have sort of 2 diaries, my diary day to day and my bigger diary that I used to write about what I did. And it was almost like I should have just burnt them both, because there was nothing planned. Everything was cancelled. I might as well have just taken a match to them. The not knowing when it was going to end was quite tricky, or is quite tricky, when it's really all going to be open and everything is back to the new normal, or hopefully a little bit like the old normal. And I think companies are going to have to adapt massively around their employees. Some employees won't be comfortable going to their offices, even if they can give them all the health and safety requirements that are necessary and laid out by the government. People might not want to risk their health and their family's health. How does a company operate around that, even though they've put in all the right things? I think the working from home element is going to become so much more of how we operate. I definitely have found it, back to that efficiency thing, a much more efficient way of operating. It means I can, get good sleep every night. I can exercise in the morning. I can be at my desk when I need to be ready to go. And I haven't commuted, and I haven't contributed to pollution. I haven't had to be on a bus or a tube. It's a much more efficient way of doing things. And I'm even, I'm editing with editors remotely. I'm using screen share to go through edits on a timeline. That's amazing. If I can do that when I'm away around the world, if I end up going traveling again, then that's really amazing. That's really an efficient way of us operating. So I think companies are going to have to be really, careful and kind with their employees, but also really flexible. And I think in the old days, there was that classic, like, oh, so-and-so is working from home, and sort of raise the eyebrows and like, oh, it's a sunny day. Thinking that potentially because the sun was shining, so-and-so said they're going to work from home because actually they're going to lie in their garden or go to the park. And I think now it's become it is the norm, working from home. We're all getting on with our jobs. The jobs are still being done if you're still in full-time employment. So I think it's taken away that sort of working from home, hey, feeling. So I hope that more employers will, incorporate it into their weekly structure, perhaps 1-2 days working from home. And if that can help the environment as well, which we've seen it has, then that's even better. And I just think, taking away some of the stresses of having to be somewhere all the time, just constantly on the go. I just think this downtime has been really good. But I do think in the creative industries, companies, one thing we have found quite difficult is coming up with new creative ideas on your own, sitting at your laptop, potentially your kitchen table, can be quite difficult when you haven't got someone just to chat something through. At work, you forget how you might come into work, you've got something to work on in the morning, and it gets to 11 o'clock and you just can't work out how to put something together or a line in a press release. And you get up and make a coffee and you happen to see a colleague there with you and you go, I'm really struggling with it. I can't work it out. What do you think? And they go, oh, well, why don't you change this for this? And you go, oh my God, that's amazing. Thanks so much. Go back to your desk and you complete your task for the morning, whatever it was. And I think those little encounters, those creative moments are probably the things that we've all missed the most, I would say. Just that sort of, group thinking and being face to face with people. But I think there's definitely a middle ground we can find with a bit of working from home, a bit of going into the office. And the technology has been, touch wood, pretty amazing, I have to say, the way we've all been able to link up around the world. It's been an amazing sort of 2-3 months of learning and being very flexible, getting things done.
Definitely, it's been a lifesaver with the technology. So the last 2 questions, talking then about what's going on. So just, your lockdown experience. I know you were in Australia with F1 when everything started to happen. I also know that one of the sacrifices you've had to make, to be able to do Formula One in this manner has been just the personal sacrifices from not seeing friends. And, I remember you telling me not being able to go to a lot of weddings and stuff. So has this time been quite nice to just catch up with a bit of that? And
It's funny, when I went into lockdown, I actually, because I keep the diary every day, I had a little look back. And it's amazing how many times I'd written things like, I wish I could spend a bit more time at home. I really wish I'd got into a routine, or, just little things that you just kind of throw out there, but it's all little wishes that suddenly have come true, which is awful because no one wanted it to be through a global pandemic. That is not what I was asking for. But yes, being away so much, you don't get that routine, you don't get to see family and friends, you don't really have much control, even on simple things like, I can't cook for myself when I'm away. So that means I'm having to eat what someone else has prepared and potentially not very good for me or whatever it might be. And so kind of to take that control back has been amazing for the last few months. And I feel like I've really kind of got myself in order. I think my fear now coming out of lockdown is that sort of, oh my gosh, have I made the most of lockdown? Have I read enough books? Have I listened to enough podcasts? Have I made enough banana bread? Have I tried enough new recipes? Oh my goodness, have I completed all those box sets on Netflix that everyone's been recommending? And now I'm sort of panicking, like, did I make the most of lockdown? It's been, I think at the beginning I was quite strict with my routine and I was like writing my little to-do list, and slowly I've been trying to be like, no, it's fine because you'll get that done. There's time. And I think it's just seeing there's so much time in a day, which sometimes you can forget when you're busy. I don't have time for that. But actually, if you just slow everything down, there is definitely time for that. And it probably helps that we're not going out for dinner every night, seeing friends and staying up too late. But it's been a really good time just to sort of, I probably wasn't ready for the season. Maybe I needed a bit of extra time. Who knows?
Fair enough. And what was the experience like in Australia when it was all sort of going on? Because it was quite crazy. It was one of, it was mad to watch from afar. Yeah,
it was a huge moment, and I think a lot of people, we didn't really know what was going on, and I think that was quite confusing. we'd all got there, and I think we were all so excited to go racing, and there was that back to school feeling which we always talk about with Melbourne. And there was a lot of the elbow hello, do you know what I mean, the hello, how are you, touching elbows, and we look back and you just think, God, we're being sort of, that's crazy, but we all were doing what we were told. That was how we were meant to say hello. But it was a weird time, and I think also we were all just hoping it wasn't true. You know, we were hoping Formula One would continue, because Formula One will continue and nothing will stop Formula One. And I think suddenly when it was cancelled, we were just like, oh my goodness, this is big. Like, this is bigger than we thought. And probably foolishly, I probably didn't think it would come to that. And yes, to have got out there, I had a lovely few days before the race weekend kicked in, which I'm very glad about. I made the most of the amazing Melbourne brunch scene and cafe culture. And then, yeah, getting to the track, catching up with everyone. And then, yeah, it being cancelled on that Friday. Oh my goodness, it was so weird. And we were all walking through the paddock trying to work out what was going on, because we'd been told to go. And then it was obviously cancelled. So it was all sort of, people were sort of whispering, sort of like, what have you heard? Oh, what have you heard? And everyone was sort of scrolling through Twitter and Instagram, trying to see if, you know, a team had updated anything, or, you know, there'd been anything from F1. And yeah, it was an uncertain time. And I think it was so early on in the crisis. I know there had been terrible deaths already and terrible, you know, illness around the world already, but I think we were early on, if you know what I mean. I don't think people realised obviously what was to come. And so, yeah, it was a strange time, a very confusing time, but I'm glad we all got back safely in the end. So some of the teams having to stay out for a long time to be quarantined. But yeah, we all made it back, and hopefully the majority of that paddock will be racing again in Austria in less than a month. It's crazy to think. It's been so long, and yet now it seems so close.
Yeah, it's definitely passed by quite fast, despite all of it feeling from quite far away. So hopefully, you know, when things are back to normal, and I know this season's going to be quite different in terms of circuits and the ability for people to even come down and watch it. But next year, hopefully, if you know, we're all back to how it was in terms of circuits, what's one of your favourite ones to go to and to report from?
Well, my favourite one is Melbourne, and that's probably for personal reasons, because I lived out there for a year when I was younger. I just love the way that it's in the city. I love the sort of that back to school feeling. The paddock is glorious. It's very grassy and lovely trees, and it's a really nice close paddock, which nowadays you think of being close to people and you just think, gosh, what a silly thing to want to wish for. We should all be separate and not spreading any diseases. But of course, actually, you just want to be with everyone. So it's a wonderful paddock. In that respect, I like the track, great Aussie fans, and you can walk in and out of the city. It's a really good place to go racing. It doesn't necessarily always bring the best races, but I really like going there because it kind of makes me think, here we go. And of course, we were slightly taken away from everyone this year, so it'd be nice to go back there next year. I really hope it's on the calendar.
Very good. Yeah, I hope so too. Are you a good driver, Rosanna?
I'm excellent. I'm considering putting myself forward for some of these seats that are available for the 2021 season. I do love driving. I've always made sure that I'm in a position to have a car, so it's one of my sort of priorities, because it's very helpful for me with work. I need to be able to drive around. And yeah, I enjoy it. I come from a family of people who love cars. One of my uncles loves rallying. My dad loves cars, so much so that he puts his window down when we're at a junction to hear a car pull away. He gets very excited about the sounds. And as I said, my brother has worked in Formula One and still works in Formula One. So yeah, I come from a family that love cars. I like driving. I've had a few driver days here and there over a few years I've been in the industry. I'm just I don't mind doing a track day, but I just know that I've not got it in me to put it to the edge like the drivers do and swing it around a corner like I think I'd be scared of the crashes. So it would probably prevent me from giving my all when it came to racing. I'd probably be like, no, you go, please, you have the first turn, you lead into that. That's totally okay. After you. I'd be very happy to come in last and clap all the winners at the end.
Rosanna, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been nice to chat about so many different things.
Absolutely. You're a very interesting woman. Wishing you And good luck with going back to F1. We'll be watching with great excitement, and hopefully we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Speak to you soon.
Take care. Bye.
What a great chat. Rosanna's journey in F1 has been a fascinating one, and her experiences really reflect that. It was super interesting hearing about the challenges she faced, particularly with things like her height that naturally are not in her control. Since the time of this recording, F1 has thankfully returned to our screens, and it's been one of the things that's kept me going during the lockdown. The Williams team has now been, of course, sold, so it will be really interesting to see the direction they take and if they can bring the Williams name back to victory, and also whether they continue to integrate females into their mission, as levelling the playing field was something Claire Williams was particularly passionate about, and F1 is undergoing a huge organisational shift at the moment. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to listen to this episode. I hope you're leaving with some great inspiration that can help you with whatever you want to achieve in your life. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe via your favourite podcast platform so you can be notified when a new episode is posted. It would also mean the world to us if you could rate and review the show and share it with your friends so we can reach as many people as possible. If you want to reach out to me as well, you can get in touch directly at dj.n1nja on Instagram and Twitter. That's dj.n1nja, and also at Mission Makers on social media. Thanks so much again for listening. Until next time, Mission Makers, stay safe and have an amazing week.